In this lesson, we'll look at the workflow for setting up lighting for our final rendered shot. Okay, so the scene that I'm working with now is called Lesson 86 Start. So this is essentially our final animation. So with a little bit of camera animation added in here, a little bit of animation as far as the ship movement, as well as our particle dynamics, which we learned how to do with Chris in some of our earlier lessons. So what we're going to start to do now is bring all of this together in our final render. Now, looking at this, you can see we have absolutely no lighting or anything like that that's been set up. So we're going to learn how we can start to come in and basically set this up very, very simply. So let's start by addressing our default light. So if you recall from one of the earlier lessons in this section, I had mentioned that within Softimage, we always have this default light that's in here. Now, for some situations, you may want to come in here and just simply delete this and start from scratch. However, in my case, I want this ship and this whole scene to be sort of a up in the sky sequence. So as far as the overall lighting for this, really we would want probably a direct light for our sunlight, and then probably just a lot of surrounding light for sort of the blue secondary illumination that would come from the sky. So the fact that I need sort of a sunlight to begin with means that this basic directional light will be a perfect starting point. So rather than delete this, I'll just use this to my advantage. So with this light selected, I'll go ahead and press the H key on my keyboard to unhide this. You can see we no longer have that little H icon next to this. So H key on my keyboard. And now if I were to move this over, right now I'm looking through my shot camera. So this might be a little bit easier if I were to switch one of my other views to maybe just my default camera. And there we go. If I have this set to an X-ray view, we should be able to see things like our lights directly through the geometry, so there it is. Now, if you recall, again, the positioning and the placement of these types of lights really make no difference whatsoever. When it comes to working with these infinite lights, again, these work all the way through infinity, so we can place these wherever they want, and that will have no effect whatsoever on our final lighting result. The only thing that we have to consider is just the overall angle in the direction of where our light's coming from. So in my case, I'm going to swivel this over to where the light's sort of coming from the side, kind of the opposite direction where our camera is. So if we were to come in and render this, this is sort of what I'm looking for. Again, where the light's kind of coming in from the opposite side of where our camera is currently positioned. Now with this light selected, I'll go ahead and press Enter on my keyboard. Go ahead and give this some shadows. And while I'm at it, I'll take my umbra all the way down to 0. So that way we should get some really, really dark, intense black shadows. Okay, now that gives us a decent little starting point here. So as far as the overall light direction, you can see we have some nice little highlights that are coming through over here, as well as some nice highlights over on the wing. But really we need to get a lot more of the illumination from the overall scene kind of in here. So we'll do this with a process called image-based lighting. So to do this, I'm going to jump over into my render menus. And down here toward the bottom under Pass, I'm going to go to Edit, and then Edit Current Pass. What we're going to use is actually an image of a sky, and we'll use the color information from that sky to actually generate new light from those directions and from that illumination source and that texture map. So this will make just a little bit more sense here in just a moment. So let's start by going into our Pass shaders. We'll go to Add, and in my case I'm going to add an environment. Now with my environment, we'll plug in the image. So I'll go to New, New from File, and if you take a look inside the Pictures directory of the project that we're working out of, I'm going to plug in my clouds.env or _env. So this is our clouds environment. Now if I were to come in and again press and hold the Q key on my keyboard and re-render, we should now see this new background. So this is basically just a map of some clouds that is built to go around, some kind of a spherical map. And this is a completely encompassing environment. So as I start to swivel my camera around and move it, you should see my environment move right along with it. Okay, so we have this set up. Now, what I want to do is bring in some illumination from this environment and actually use that to light my scene. So to do that, we're going to go to Regions. Let's go to All Options. And we're going to look for our final gathering. So final gathering is the name of this process that we're going to use to generate our light from this surrounding environment. So with final gathering, let's turn that on. Give this just a moment. And all of a sudden, you should see that our image starts to look much, much better. So again, we're actually now using some of this surrounding color, this blue color from our sky, and using that to actually add additional lighting into our render. Now, to make this illumination just a little bit brighter, if I find that this is still maybe just a little too dark, I can go back to my environment and make the adjustment there. So once again, I'll go back to Pass, Edit Current Pass. We're going to go to our environment. Let's just double click on that. And that'll get us back to our environment pass, which is where we just plugged in our sky image a few moments ago. Now what we can do is take our image and bump that up to something a little bit higher, maybe 1.5. What that should do is make the image intensity start to become factored a little bit more into our lighting that we're generating here. So shouldn't really affect the overall appearance of our sky in the background. Again, just letting it have a little bit more effect on the illumination that's being generated. We can also come in and adjust things like the rotation of this environment. So think of this as being just sort of a sphere that we can rotate along its y direction. So maybe if I wanted some more clouds in here, we can come in and just try to set my rotation until we get some more clouds that are in here. So we may have had some clouds that were sort of back here behind the camera. So just rotating that until we start to see something more within our viewport. All right, very nice. So if I were to come in and let's just render out this whole little section here, you can see that the final gathering process does add a little bit of render time. Sometimes it can add a pretty significant amount of render time, but you can see how very, very quickly we can come in here and start to set up our lighting. Okay, so we have one light, which is our sunlight, coming through here. The rest of the illumination is being provided by our final gather, which is from our environment back here. Now, what I might do is add just maybe one more light in here to sort of pull out some of the highlights and some of the shapes that we have here. So let's go to Get Primitive Light, and I'll add another infinite light. Now, once again, I might jump over here so I can actually see this from my camera view. This light, I'm going to angle it so that it comes in a little bit more from the side where our camera is pointing. So we can maybe start with something like that. I really don't want this to be a very strong light, so I'm just going to select this. Let's maybe bring the intensity down to something quite a bit lower. I will go ahead and make sure it does have some shadows, and I'll set the umbra down to 0 so that way we don't have any odd light behavior. So coming in here and looking at that, let this render through. There we go. So you can see that that adds just a little bit more light into this side of our aircraft. And it also helps to add just a little bit more of a highlight into some of these areas. But again, it's just a very, very subtle effect. This is maybe not physically accurate 100%, but sometimes getting what you want artistically and the look that you want artistically is sometimes a little bit more important than what is always physically accurate. Okay, so very nice. You can see with just a couple of simple light sources and this image-based lighting environment, you can see we've come in here and very, very quickly set up a nice little lighting solution for our scene. Now, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about the process of final gathering and exactly what is happening with this from a technical point of view, this is something that we actually discuss in quite a bit of detail in our Introduction to Mental Ray in Softimage course. So once you have a chance to finish this and maybe go through some of our introductory courses, our Introduction to Mental Ray course might be a great one for you to go through, where we'll, again, kind of demystify this final gathering process and let you see a lot more methods for coming in and integrating mental ray and some of these other indirect lighting methods in your final renders. So what we'll do now in our next lesson is continue through this process of getting our final scene set up, and we'll look at how we can start to prepare this for our final output.